The government shutdown is now the longest on record, and there's no end in sight. Democrats won't budge on providing more than $1.3 billion for President Trump's border wall.
No president should pound the table and demand he gets his way, or else the government shuts down.
And President Trump won't consider any proposal from the Democrats without more wall funding.
How much more American blood must we shed before Congress does its job?
Stuck in the middle are thousands of government workers.
Been with this government 9 years. I think I've been through 5 of these. They're not fun.
I can see my desk from here. DC can't get on the same page. Why are we the collateral damage?
This is our second time we haven't got paid, so, it really hurt.
Put everybody back to work and get the country moving again. It's ridiculous.
Thousands of so-called essential personnel like air traffic controllers and FBI agents are working without regular paychecks. But because most shutdowns in years past have only lasted for a few days, and because they haven't been as frequent as they are now, groups of federal employees are mounting legal challenges over working without regular paychecks. One lawsuit accuses the government of violating the 13th Amendment. That's the one that outlaws slavery and involuntary servitude. In this case, the lawsuit claims that federal workers are being forced into involuntary servitude by working without regular paychecks. Here's the attorney behind the lawsuit explaining the case.
Obviously our plaintiffs are all federal employees who were deemed essential, who had to report to work, and were frustrated with the fact that they were required to work for no pay at a time when they had financial obligations. I really think that it came about just as, kind of some of these things do in conversation, just bouncing ideas back and forth, and somebody saying, this sounds just like involuntary servitude. And we said, well, you know what, that's exactly what it is. And we did the research, and, even though there's never been a case quite like this, it fits perfectly into the definition. And so we thought we'd bring it to the court and see what happens.
The U.S. is now in uncharted waters when it comes to legal challenges against the shutdown, because one has never lasted so long.
The recent lawsuit regarding the 13th Amendment is a really novel challenge that we haven't seen before in other federal shutdowns. But now that we're seeing a longer period of a shutdown, more novel legal arguments are going to be made, and we're going to be watching that really closely and seeing if other arguments are going to appear in the coming days or weeks.
What could also eventually change future shutdowns is going after a law drafted nearly 150 years ago. It's called the Anti-Deficiency Act. At the time, it was designed to reiterate Congress's power of the purse.
Congress authorizes and appropriates funds, and the executive branch spends and implements those funds. But the Anti-Deficiency Act really wasn't thought of by Congress in its initial format as an employment law or regulating employment policy. And with shutdowns becoming more and more frequent, it actually is having a key role in employment policy when it comes to the federal government.
Over time, the law became the de facto employment policy that the federal government uses to force workers to clock in without knowing when they'll be paid next. Dickey argues that the law, as it's practiced under current government shutdowns, contradicts another law called the Fair Labor Standards Act. The law is from the 1930s, and it requires the federal government to pay its workers a minimum wage.
There are some real clashes between the Anti-Deficiency Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act when it comes to a shutdown situation. And we're currently seeing several class action lawsuits in the federal courts trying to work out that clash.
So as the government shutdown drags on, watch the courts. If any of these challenges succeed, the next shutdown could play out much differently.
But you never see a case in today's world where people are being forced at the threat of losing their property to work for free. It doesn't happen in today's world, and it shouldn't.